Thanks for coming in such high numbers. So I'm eyeballing this, but this is about 25, maybe 30 people. Today we have the honor of having an early career researcher as our speakers, who in a short time already had a number of tremendous achievements. So Janina Garbas recently graduated with a PhD in business from the University of Passau. She published her doctoral research in the Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science, which for non-marketers is one of the highest ranking marketing journals. And she's now employed as a postdoc at RWTH Aachen, which is an elite German university. So quite an achievement for a starting scholar who just finished her PhD. And with that, I'd like to give all the attention to Janina.
Thanks, Frank. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm just sharing my screen and my slides. Let me just give a second. So now you should be able to see my screen, right? I'm glad to see so many of you today. As Frank already said, my name is Janina, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher at RWTH Aachen University. And the reason that we are here today is that Frank approached me a couple of weeks ago and told me that he's hosting a seminar series where junior faculty members share their stories and their experiences. And I'm happy to share some lessons learned during the PhD journey and the submission process. And this is also the title of today's presentation. So climbing the PhD mountain, lessons learned through the PhD journey and the submission process. And I hope that this talk will be helpful for you in successfully climbing your PhD mountain as well. I think that this metaphor is quite, quite useful, because there are quite some similarities between climbing a mountain and doing a PhD. This is a great opportunity, and I'm glad to share some of my personal experiences from the last couple of years. And let me say that this is really what this talk is about: personal experience. The lessons that I'm sharing with you today are based on talks I listened to in the last years and on discussions I had and with senior scholars that stuck to my mind, as well as my personal experience during this journey. And let me also say that this talk is not covering a list that is exhaustive, nor that works for everyone in the same way. Also, others might disagree on some points, but this is also the beauty of it. Everybody makes a unique experience during this journey, and I hope that I can give you some food for thought, just like others did when I listened to their talks. Whenever you have questions during the talk, please raise your hand or unmute yourself. I'm happy to answer questions, and I hope I can answer them. Before kicking this talk off, I would like to start with a short introduction of myself. Frank already did a great job in setting the scene, but just to add some points to that, my research interests, they revolve around the interface between marketing, consumer behavior, and technological innovations, and contribute to an understanding of how consumers evaluate innovative products and services. And in particular, I'm interested in the transformation of products into dynamic service platforms, which I will also be talking about today, privacy-related decision-making, social media marketing, and the impact of technology in retail and service environments. I have reviewed for several conferences over the last years, including Winter AMA and Summer AMA, the European Marketing Conference, EMAC, and AMS Conference, and so on. And I will come back to that point later, so this is why I'm mentioning that. Yeah, and Frank already said it. Besides my PhD graduation, I was lucky to celebrate another major milestone. My first research project, which I'm also going to present today, was published in the Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science recently. So yeah, let's jump right into the topic that I will cover during this talk. First, I would like to start by a short research presentation of my recently published JAMS article, which is labeled "You Want to Sell This to Me Twice? How Perceptions of Betrayal May Undermine Internal Product Upgrades." Second, I will share some lessons learned before and during the review process to hopefully increase the chance of getting published in a top marketing journal. Third, I wanted to share some of my key experiences about successfully finishing a PhD. And finally, I will share my personal experience on how to increase the chance of receiving a job offer. But let me say that I will focus on some top-level aspects, as the German system is quite different, I think, and my experience of getting a job offer as a postdoctoral researcher is restricted to Germany. Okay, yeah, let's start. So this is the agenda of today's talk. I will kick this off with the research presentation I just mentioned. And here you can see the paper. If you're interested in having a look at the paper, you can find the QR code below here. And this is the author team that I worked on with the paper. So this paper is joint work with Sebastian Schubach, who is my colleague from the University of Passau, with Martin Mende and Maura Scott, who are professors at Florida State University, as well as Jan Schumann, who used to be my supervisor at University of Passau, and is also my co-author on this paper. So yeah, first I would like to start by setting the scene for my research topic. So just imagine that you are regularly going on a weekend trip to the mountains with your car, and you typically start your trips at night. So when you purchased the car a year ago, you decided against adaptive headlights. Now you kind of regret that you had not purchased those adaptive headlights back then. What would you do now? Well, for a long time, you would have to call your dealership, make an appointment, and have adaptive headlights installed with quite some effort. Due to the evolution of the Internet of Things, however, physical products are not static anymore, but rather they evolve into dynamic service platforms that allow for customization throughout their life cycle. And to illustrate what I mean, I brought two examples from Tesla and Audi. For instance, car makers like Tesla and Audi, they increasingly transform their cars into such platforms, and they sell models with integrated yet artificially limited add-on hardware features, like, for instance, more battery power or adaptive headlights, and they enable their customers to reconfigure their cars by offering fee-based access to those features. So going back to the example I just shared in the beginning, this would mean that you wouldn't have to go to the dealership, but you could simply pay and unlock the features wherever you are. And we label this new marketplace phenomenon internal product upgrades, and we define it as fee-based activation of originally built-in but deliberately restricted optional features. And despite the growing relevance for car makers, this new revenue model is not restricted to the automotive industry. So basically all products which can be connected through any form of sensor, like mobile phones, laptops, or even household appliances, are eligible for this chargeable reconfiguration of add-on features, thus providing a huge field of application. So why would firms follow this strategy? Well, this new marketplace phenomenon, as you might imagine, is forecasted to grow into a multi-billion-dollar business. For example, car makers are expected to earn an additional $155 billion by 2022. And it's getting even better, as this new revenue model is not just thought to be beneficial for firms, but also for consumers. As we all know, consumers' preferences evolve over time, and internal product apps represent a comfortable way to respond to those changing needs, as you saw in the introduction. So it really seems like a win-win business model. Well, the reality can be quite different, and it's the same here. So there are also potential risks associated with this new revenue model that marketers need to understand and manage. And to illustrate what I mean, I brought two tweets. So anecdotal evidence from the automotive industry, Tesla, suggests that consumers might perceive internal product upgrades in a negative way. And I'm just going to read off one of them. So, hold up, Tesla is hiding the max battery range until we need it. That's messed up. And those tweets already give us a pre-taste on how consumers might perceive internal upgrades. They indicate that marketers might be overly optimistic when it comes to internal product upgrades, which is why studying the consequences of internal upgrades is relevant from a managerial point of view. So why is it crucial to study internal upgrades from an academic point of view? Well, to date, existing research on product feature modifications has focused on related phenomena such as external add-ons, product versioning, and product upgrading. And even though these marketing approaches are related and provide useful insights, we propose that internal upgrades are conceptually distinct because of the key characteristics of the experience that is involved in upgrading. So features are already built into the base product the consumer owns and purchased. They are deliberately restricted, but they can be activated in the post-purchase phase by paying a fee, which makes it pretty unique as compared to the existing approaches. So within our research project, we focus on the post-purchase stage as internal upgrades are an important after-sales strategy, and we investigate consumers' responses to permanently sold internal upgrades as done by Tesla, for instance. And as such, we compare internal upgrades to the established way of product upgrades through external features. So having the feature installed from the external way. And to understand how and why consumers respond to internal product upgrades the way they do, we built on research on normative expectations and exchange relationships, as well as research on psychological ownership to address the following three research questions. So first of all, will internal versus external product upgrades have negative effects on consumers' responses in terms of A, their willingness to pay for the feature, and B, their loyalty intentions towards the firm? Second, which underlying mechanisms help explain these effects? And third, how can firms mitigate the negative effects of internal product upgrades? To answer our research questions, we've conducted 6 experimental studies in 2 different contexts, or it's like 5 experimental studies and 1 survey, but in 2 different contexts. And even though I would love to walk you through the detailed results of every single study, in the interest of time, I will focus on giving you a short overview and provide the details of 2 studies, or no, it's 3 studies actually, afterwards. So in study 1, we were interested in the main effect that upgrade locus, that is internal versus external upgrades, have on consumers' willingness to pay and their loyalty intentions. Study 2 then introduces our first mediator, perceived betrayal. I will come to that in a moment, and investigates a distribution-related strategy to attenuate negative effects of internal upgrades. Study 3A then tests the proposed full serial mediation via perceived ownership and perceived betrayal. I will share the reasoning with you in a second, while the purpose of study 3B was to rule out several alternative explanations. Finally, studies 4A and study 4, and 5, they test 2 moderators related to product strategies. And today I will be sharing the results of studies 1, 2, and 3A. And just not that you're not confused, I will slightly change the order of the studies and end with study 2, so with the moderator study. All right, let's start with study 1. In study 1, we manipulated upgrade locus, so whether participants were confronted with an internal versus external upgrades. And this is just to get an idea whether internal upgrades are really perceived negatively by consumers. This study context was a consumer electronics context, and just to give you a short idea of what the situation looked like, we asked participants to imagine that they had bought a phone a while ago and that their memory space is almost full. And next we told them that they can upgrade their phone's memory by purchasing an additional memory chip. In the external condition, we told them that the memory chip comes from outside, so it is not already integrated in the product, but they can just, as they are used to, just purchase an external memory chip and add it to their phone. While in the internal upgrade condition, we told them that they can pay for the memory chip and then unlock the memory chip that is already built into the product that they purchased. So what were the results of the study? Having a look at our UNCOVER results, we see that consumers have a lower log-transformed willingness to pay for internal product upgrades as compared to external product upgrades. And having a look at loyalty intentions on the right-hand side, we see the same pattern. So consumers that are confronted with internal product upgrades show less favorable loyalty intentions as compared to consumers who are confronted with external upgrades. So study one shows that the new marketplace phenomenon of internal upgrades has negative consequences for consumers' behavioral intentions. The question is, why is that? And now I would like to walk you through our underlying reasoning. So external relationships between consumers and firms are governed by distinct norms that develop over time. And as a reference point to evaluate whether a firm adheres to these relationship norms and whether it treats consumers fairly, consumers often consider their previous marketplace experiences, which constitute the status quo. So what does the status quo look like for a long time? So traditionally, when consumers purchased physical goods in external relationships, a full transfer of ownership occurred. And with that ownership, consumers used to acquire full property rights over the object, like the right to possess and be able to use all of its physical components, right? Notably, however, when products become reconfigurable now after the purchase, as in the case of internal product upgrades, ownership boundaries become increasingly blurred. And we think that even though consumers may have no legal claim to use the feature without paying an extra fee, the fact that it's built into the base product will elicit psychological ownership, perceived feature ownership for this internal feature as they are built into the base product the consumer owns. And consequently, in the case of internal upgrades, we expect that a fee-based activation of a hardware feature that is being perceived as part of one's endowment will likely elicit a perception of norm violation because consumers believe that they have to pay extra to use their own property. In contrast, we expect that external product upgrades are not perceived as a norm violation as the external feature is not already part of the product the consumer purchased, but is a separate item. And hence we expect that consumers are less likely to incorporate the external feature as part of their endowment and do not sense that they have to pay for something they consider as being theirs. All right, and yeah, we tested these assumptions in a single factor between subject design study, similar to study one. We manipulated internal and external upgrades. We measured willingness to pay loyalty intentions, and additionally, perceived feature ownership and perceived betrayal. And the product context was the same as in study one, so we focused on consumer electronics context. All right, so what do we see when having a look at the results? We see that we are able to replicate the findings of study one for willingness to pay and loyalty intentions, which was, by the way, also very important for publishing the paper in JAMS to show that we are able to replicate our effect in each and every single study. But more important in this study, we also see that consumers perceive a higher feature ownership and feel significantly more betrayed when being confronted with internal upgrades. So just in line with what we would have expected. To test the underlying proposed processes, we conducted serial mediation analyses on each outcome variable using process model 6, estimating the indirect effect of upgrade locus on both willingness to pay and loyalty intentions through perceived feature ownership and perceived betrayal. And the results revealed the predicted serial mediation paths of the effect of upgrade locus on willingness to pay and loyalty intentions through perceived feature ownership and perceived betrayal, as you can see here. So to sum it up, study 3A confirms that consumers perceive a higher feature ownership for internal upgrades, which can be attributed to higher, or which then in turn increase perceptions of betrayal, and ultimately have negative consequences for their behavioral intentions. So now we know that consumers react negatively, and we know why they react negatively. So how can firms attenuate these negative effects of internal upgrades? This was the purpose of study 2. And one way to do so could be to shift the upgrading responsibility from the consumer to the firm. In both study 1 and study 3A, the consumer himself was responsible for upgrading the product, both internally and externally. And even though this is seen as a big advantage of internal upgrades, this self-service-based acquisition of restricted hardware in a purchase product can make it very salient to consumers that the increased performance already resides within the base product and is literally just a fingertip and a payment away from use. Hence, in study 2, we wanted to test whether shifting this upgrading responsibility from the consumer to the firm can actually attenuate these negative effects. And that is what we tested in study 2. As a DV, we measured consumers' willingness to pay, and as a mediator variable, we focused on perceived betrayal. Moreover, to increase the generalizability of our results, the base product in study 2 was a car, and the feature that was about to be upgraded was a digital radio receiver. So having a look into the results of study 2, we find a significant interaction effect of upgrade locus and upgrading responsibility on both willingness to pay and perceived betrayal. And again, importantly, we are able to replicate our previous effects under consumer responsibility for both willingness to pay and perceived betrayal, but not under company responsibility. So as you can see here, the effect is attenuated. For company responsibility, we do not see any significant difference between internal and external upgrades with regard to willingness to pay, and we only see a marginally significant difference with regard to perceived betrayal. So next, we estimated the indirect effect of our two-way interaction on willingness to pay through perceived betrayal using process model 7. And we find that perceived betrayal mediates for consumer self-upgrading, but not for company upgrading. So to sum it up, study 2 shows that the negative effect of internal upgrades is attenuated under company responsibility. What are some additional insights from our subsequent studies that I cannot share with you today in the interest of time, but I wanted to give you a brief overview. So in study 3B, we rule out several alternative explanations like effort perceptions, environmental friendliness, and so on. In study 4, we reveal that our negative effects are mitigated for features that are rather intangible versus tangible. So consumers perceive it negatively when they have to upgrade physical hardware, but not software. And finally, we show that the negative effect of tangible features can be mitigated for consumers who have a low base product identity relevance, meaning that they just don't care very much about their base product. They don't have a strong connection to their base product. So on this circumstance, the negative effect is attenuated. So what do we learn from our research? So we contribute to existing literature as we introduce internal product upgrades and thus respond to calls for research on products as dynamic service platforms. And we extend product feature modification research by showing that consumers perceive internal upgrades more negatively than external upgrades, by revealing the underlying processes for the negative effects, and by identifying boundary conditions for the negative effects. And what can practitioners learn and where can we go from there? So managers should really note that even though internal upgrades may offer customization benefits to consumers, this new revenue model can come with unintended consequences for firms. Managers are really enthusiastic about this new revenue model, but we make them aware that they might be overly optimistic and should be aware of the downsides of this new revenue model. But we also reveal circumstances under which internal upgrades are detrimental for firms and under which not. And for instance, as I showed to you today, having the company upgrade the feature could help. So yeah, that's it with the research presentation. Are there any questions so far, or should we do questions in the end?
It sounds like we can do it in the end.
Okay, that's good. So if there are no questions right now, let me continue with some lessons learned before and during the publication process. Before I start, let me again say that my experience on how to get a paper published is limited so far. So there are other people who are much more experienced and can share more insights. The points that I will mention in this section are mainly based on the publication process in JAMS, which was obviously successful, and some other papers that are currently in the review process. Yeah, some talks I listened to and some discussions I had with senior scholars. So this is how I put together the following slides. So here I've listed some tips on how I think you can enhance your chance of getting published in a top journal. And I listed like some tips from before the submission and during the submission, and kind of made a chronological order. So if you're at an early stage, it might make sense to discuss your ideas with your colleagues from time to time. So for instance, in Passau, we had intern research meetings where we could or would discuss our research even at a very, very early stage. So just to discuss ideas and just to even show some stimuli or something like that. So I think that this will help you to keep going, as I personally learned that deadlines help to move projects forward. So this is really important. At more advanced stages, if you have the opportunity and the financial means, submit your work to conferences and even better doctoral colloquiums, because there is more time to discuss your paper. And I think some of the best feedback I got on my research was at doctoral colloquiums. So I think you have almost like an hour, you have 30 minutes of research presentation and 30 minutes of discussion. So this will really help to move your project forward. Also, and this relates to something that I shared with you in the beginning, I personally found it helpful to review for conferences, and conferences are always looking for reviewers. While this might not have a direct impact on your research, it will definitely help you to understand what reviewers are looking for in a paper. And I think that this has helped me to get some sense of, okay, what are reviewers looking for? How can I translate that into my own research projects? Also, carefully select your target journals, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but some journals are more managerially oriented, like JM or JAMS, where you need to highlight the managerial relevance of your research. You might need some tables illustrating how this phenomenon that you are studying is implemented in the actual marketplace. You might need field data and so on. And on the other hand, there are more theoretically oriented journals like JCR, JCP, where you need a stronger theory and multiple carefully designed experiments. And hence, you should carefully evaluate your paper in light of this. And what can also help is to read your target journal's editorials. They can help to give an idea of what editors are of your target journal are looking for. So yeah, when it comes to polishing the paper before the submission, and also maybe in earlier stages, it's helpful to read recently published articles of your target journal to just get an impression of the look and feel of your outlet. For instance, which are the statistics the papers of your target journal typically report. Make sure to cite papers from your target journal before submitting the paper and so on. So I think that this is also something that you might want to consider. The next point is not from me, but from one of my co-authors, who always used to say, submit the best work possible when first submitting to a journal. And I think it's not easy to decide when you reach the point of having the best work possible. My recommendation here would be to talk to your co-authors and maybe ask for a friendly review to just get some impressions of where you're standing at with your paper. When you're close to submission, carefully select potential reviewers. I don't know whether all journals do it, but the ones that I submitted to, they always ask us to suggest potential reviewers who are familiar with the topic. There is no guarantee, though, that you will get those reviewers, but I think spending some time on thinking who is a reviewer that is familiar with the project, or like not the project but the topic, can increase your chances of getting published. And finally, you should mentally prepare for a long and exhausting review process. So the JAMS publication process, or the review process, took us more than 2 years from the initial submission to the final decision. So so I think to mentally prepare for a long review process might help. Okay. What are some lessons learned during the review process? So I think it's crucial. So when you receive your reviews back, and hopefully they are positive, and you can further work on the paper and develop it to the next round. So I think that it's crucial to put a great amount of effort into your response document. You want to show the reviewers that you have carefully addressed their comments and have worked hard to address their feedback, because reviewers also spend a great deal of time to review your paper, so you want to give them back. Second, it might help to look for the editors and the area editor suggestions. So when you get back the reviews, there often will be numerous comments, and the editors and AE suggestions often help you prioritize the most important aspects. That doesn't mean that you should ignore the other comments. You should work on them as carefully as on the comments raised by the editors and the area editors or area editor, but it helps you to start. And finally, don't be emotional, don't argue with reviewers, and try to be responsive anytime. So that were some lessons I learned during the publication process and before. And here are just 2 papers I can recommend that helped me in becoming aware of what kind of contribution we made with our paper in an earlier stage and how to sell that in JAMS. So there's this paper by Yadav, Making Emerging Phenomena a Research Priority, and the paper by McInnes, a framework for conceptual contributions in marketing. So those were quite useful for helping me develop my paper. And I was also talking about reviewing quite sometimes, and I wanted to share a link from Wiley on how to review a paper. And this might also give you an idea of what reviewers might be looking for, and that's also important in what sequence. Because in one of my discussions, I asked a senior scholar how he is reviewing, and he told me that he's looking at the abstract, which is quite normal, I think, at the title, and then at the conceptual model. And there should be a fit. So maybe this link is quite helpful for you to get an idea what reviewers are looking for, and you might want to incorporate that in your own paper. Okay, so that's it for the publication process then. If there are no questions so far, I mean, we can definitely address them at the end if there are any. What are some lessons learned during the PhD journey? And I think I can say a lot more on that than on the publication process. And I would like to start with a very famous meme. So one does not simply finish a PhD. But I think that there are some useful tips. I broke it down to 7, and I hope that these will be helpful for you to finish your PhD as well. So first, I think you need to be passionate. So work on topics that you have a passion for, because you will be working on them for a long time, and having a passion for the project that you're working on, I think it helps, because it won't feel like work then anymore. But if you love what you're doing, then this will definitely help you to keep going and developing the paper. The second one would to be curious. So my recommendation would be to take theory development and method courses if you have the opportunity, because I think that this will definitely pay off in the future. And I think that the more advanced one gets in the academic career, the busier you get with reviewing, with supporting your PhDs, and the less time you might have especially for such method courses. And of course, you get more experience. But I think that taking those method and theory development courses might help at an early stage. So the next tip would be to be determined. Look for academic role models who are a source of inspiration, who you can look up to, and follow their path ideally. So this really helped me to have some sort of role model who I can look up to. The fourth one would be to be visible. Try to network with both senior and travel to conferences will definitely help you with that, and also taking part in doctoral colloquiums. So I think that this was really useful for me to just connect with others, to get to know their perspectives, and to just broaden your perspective. The next one would be to be social, so bond with other PhD students. This also helped me a lot to travel through this PhD journey. Why is it important from my perspective? Other PhD students know exactly how you feel, and they support you in challenging times, just as you can provide support to them. So I think it's really important to be there for each other, because it can be quite challenging sometimes. So I think, just having a close network with other PhD students probably can definitely help you to proceed with your PhD. The sixth point that I want to share is to be open-minded, and this also relates back to what I just said earlier. So talk to junior and senior scholars to broaden your perspective, benefit from their experiences. So each time I think I talk to a junior or senior scholar, I learned something, and I think that this is what it's really about, to just develop yourself and learn, basically. And the final one is be persistent. A PhD is a marathon, it's not a sprint. Don't let setbacks demotivate you, they are normal. Just keep going, and finally you will be rewarded. And maybe one informal tip, work hard, but don't forget breaks. I think this is quite a funny meme. You can work whenever you want. So working in academia is great. You can work whenever you want. Every day is Saturday, but on the contrary, you work on Saturdays. You should work hard, but don't forget to take breaks as well. So to sum it up, some overall advice would be to look for people who are nice and people you like, because you will be working with them on research projects for a long time. Work with people who have complementary skills. I think that is also pretty important. And look for academic role models. And just to share my academic role models who accompanied my PhD journey. Jan Schumann, Maura Scott, and Martin Mende, who are also my co-authors and who had a huge impact on me as a young scholar. So why are they my role models? They have a high work ethic and are absolutely hard workers, but they are also kind people, and they are absolutely supportive, and they show an interest in you as a person. And I also learned a lot from them, from the publication process to personal development, methodological skills, and so on. So yeah, those three are the role models who accompanied my journey as a PhD. And yeah, I think I always look up to them and yeah, want to follow their path. And I think this helped me also to keep going. All right, so then we already come to the last point, how I prepared for the postdoc application process. And this is a rather short section, as my experience of receiving a job offer is restricted to Germany, which has quite a different system as compared to most countries. I try to break it down to the most important learnings that are not restricted to the concrete system. So first, I think you might want to think about your personal goals. So what are the research topics that you would like to pursue in the future? How important is the publication success at top journals for the school you're applying for, but also for yourself? It might help to look at recent publications of the chair or a department you want to apply for, to see if there's a fit between your goals and the school or department goals. At least that's what I did when applying for the postdoc position. Yeah, and as you might have realized, the preparation for the job market begins long before the actual application. So it already starts with the projects that you are pursuing in your PhD, as it will take a long time to develop them. And I'm sure you're aware of this. And yeah, so to know that the preparation for the job market begins long before might also be important. And finally, having a good network of co-authors, of fellow PhD students, and so on, and a promising pipeline, I think, can help. Of course, you don't always can control these facts or these issues, but I think so from my experience, this helped me in getting the job as a postdoctoral researcher. Okay, and with that, I'm at the end of my presentation. To sum it up, I think that successfully navigating a publication process and a PhD journey and getting a job are interconnected like little gear wheels. The foundation is rigorous, interesting, and impactful research and a network. And I hope that with my talk, I was able to share some personal experience, some insights with you that are useful for climbing the PhD mountain. And yeah, with that, I am at the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thanks.